Hey, this is Adam Messer, and I'm coming to you today for the first time with Muses, Memoirs, and More, your show about authors, artists, and entertainers. We're coming to you live from WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. Today's guests actually are going to be a couple of my friends that I met last year, and they have their own radio show. They also do paranormal investigation, and they write. They do a lot of cool things. It's Will Aymerich and Christina Kieffer. And can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Give me 1 second, guys. Technical difficulties. Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Will?
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear.
Okay, and Christina, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming on to the show. This is our first show, so I really am excited about being here. Like I said in the intro, we're going to be doing the show about authors, artists, and entertainers, and both of you fit the bill. You know what I mean? You guys are really entertaining. You have a lot of cool stuff going on, and I know you guys host your own radio show every week. So I just wanted to ask you. I appreciate you coming on the first show. I just want to ask you if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself. Will, if you would go first, and then Christina, that'd be great.
I'm Will Aymerich. I'm a paranormal investigator, author of Souls of Norcross, screenplay writer of various movies you've probably seen and I won't admit to, and host of the Aymerich Show.
Awesome.
Well,
Christina,
I'm Christina Kieffer. I have a background in ecology and biology, but I'm also a paranormal investigator, and I've investigated over 10 years-ish. And I've been working with Will on the show for, 2-3 years now. I kind of lost track. But I'm the co-host on the radio show.
In other words, she does everything.
Yeah. How did the whole paranormal stuff get started with both of you?
Well, mine, it was kind of not like normal people. Most people, they have an experience when they're younger, and that kind of sparked interest to figure out kind of what's going on. I was just always interested in the field. I was obsessed with X-Files. I was the only one that would ever rent the UFO books from the library. Mm-hmm. And then whenever those paranormal shows started coming on, I think TAPS, Ghost Hunters was the first one. I watched that religiously, and then eventually, it was random. My sister had joined a group, and she invited me to join with her. I was like, what? Really? I freaked out. I couldn't believe it. First, that there was other groups, like, in our area that actually did that stuff. And then second, that they would actually let me be on their team.
Yeah.
And so then, after that, I was hooked, so.
How about you, Will? How did you get involved in it?
I started out the more traditional way. I had experiences, but mostly mine started with UFOs before it went to ghosts. I've had a lot of UFO sightings and experiences living in Costa Rica. But I guess around my late teens, living in Stone Mountain, Georgia, I had a lot of paranormal activity in the house I was living in. And as I got older, I realized that a lot of the main people at the time who was involved in paranormal investigation were actually in my circle of friends and acquaintances. So talking with them and being invited to investigate with them, I learned more and more about the field, and since then, it's like I'm addicted to it. It's a drug. After a while, I mean, right now, Christina and I have been going through withdrawals recently because of my health condition. I haven't been able to investigate that much, and we haven't investigated now for about 3 months.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Yeah,
we're getting started.
We may put that to an end tonight, but we'll see.
Well, I appreciate you being on here talking about it. What's the craziest thing you've ever experienced doing an investigation?
Can it be UFOs or Does it have to be ghosts?
Whatever you think is, kind of the craziest thing you've ever experienced. Because I know you guys are writing a book that you're working on about your investigations, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's going to be fun because it's like the book is going to be a lot like the radio show. I'll write something down and Christina's going to critique it. And her critique
probably not a good idea.
Yeah, her critique will be in the book, so yeah. But
kind of like a perspective from both sides.
It's just our smart mouths, pretty much. For those that don't know, our show is not really totally family friendly, and so sometimes I'll say something just in my own way of saying it, and Christina will call me out on it. And then sometimes it's kind of like Archer when he says phrasing, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and one of the things with WRUU-LP is it is a community radio, so we do honor that clean language, even though we can talk about adult topics, but without using foul language, and there's a way to do that. So I appreciate you all kind of cleaning it up for our local show here today.
I need to be better. So I need to work on it anyway.
I kind of think of it like when you go to work, you have to use professional language. You know what I mean? Versus like if you're out with your friends, you can kind of cut up a little bit more. But yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, believe it or not, out of the two of us, she's the one with the potty mouth.
No.
We're only talking like half a percentage more.
Yeah.
No.
So what's something that kind of freaked you out on an investigation?
It was in Costa Rica around 92. My cousin Ronald and I were chasing this UFO around the mountain valley, the Central Valley of Costa Rica. And we followed it actually right back to our neighborhood. And we got on top of, there's a park by the house where I grew up, and it has a big hill on it. And we got on the hill, and we were videotaping it. And everywhere the UFO flew over, the power, that buildings and structures under the UFO, the power would go out. And it was just very strange looking. And it went through like 5 or 6, it's kind of hard to explain, but on the top of the hill, you could actually see parts of the provinces, which are kind of like states. And that's because they all join in the Central Valley area in San Jose.
Okay.
So we're seeing like corners of these states, and it was flying over different areas, and the power would go out, and then of course it flew over, not directly over us, but by our neighborhood, and the power went out. And we went back to review the video, and there's no image on the video. It's all like static, but the audio had like this weird noise, and it wasn't my cousin and I talking. And my aunt actually was videotaping it with us because she saw what we were doing and she saw what was flying around, and she had no audio but video.
Oh, wow.
And to me, to this day, that's still the strangest thing because I can't explain it. And ghost-wise, it's something else, but because this is a family show, we can't really get to that.
Okay. So with that experience, did it kind of spark your interest in the paranormal from there, or?
Oh, I was already sparked before then.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember as a kid watching X-Files, and like you said, Christina, I've been watching like shows like that pretty much my whole life, and like unsolved mysteries, that kind of thing. So, I've never really been into paranormal investigations, but I've always thought it's kind of interesting. Stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there that's not explained, and we can't really explain what it is.
Age-wise, for me, it's a little different because I've seen UFO. The first UFO I ever remember seeing, I was like 5 years old, and I was in Wheeling, West Virginia. And from then on, I was hooked. But my mom was really big into it, so of course, through her curiosity, that fueled mine. And then by the time I was 13 or 14, I was running around looking for the things myself. Ghost-wise, the paranormal, doing ghosts and spirits, that was more like 18, 19, 20 when I started getting into that. And that had to do, again, with personal experience as well. In the house I was living in Stone Mountain, I was hearing disembodied voices. I was seeing shadows. Actually, it was kind of a little bit before that, because I was living in a house in Decatur, and I was hearing I would always remember hearing my name being called somewhere in the backyard or in the house, and no one called.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. What about you, Christina? What's something that kind of freaked you out and, with the paranormal stuff?
Well, I'm not sure if it really scared me or anything. I got more excited.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, it happened maybe 2-3 years ago, not too long ago. I was actually on an investigation with the group that I used to be with, and we were up in the North Georgia mountains, kind of over in Blue Ridge area, and there's this really old house over there, and it's called the Chastain House, and it's got a lot of history to it. A doctor used to work out of it and own it, and I think he actually used it as a war hospital at some point. And I think also it was an orphanage. But, I mean, there was a lot of stories, and it was funny because they did kind of make it into a bread and breakfast, the owners were. And they were really open to letting people and groups coming in there, doing investigations and everything. As long as, you got permission and everything. But, so we get there, and you look around, there's probably 4 bedrooms or rooms downstairs and another 4 upstairs. And they had it gutted down to the studs. So you could see basically the entire floor. Like if you're like standing on the first floor, you could see everything. And
so you could see like all the old infrastructure and stuff from the building?
Yeah, you could see everything. And there wasn't any electricity either.
Oh, okay.
We hadn't got to that point yet. But so we're setting up, getting all of our gear ready for the investigation, and even setting up, we hadn't even started investigating, and we kept getting activity. It was crazy. One of the investigators, she liked to bring kind of like trigger objects, basically like toys, something that will kind of interact or get some of these spirits to maybe do something. Mm-hmm. So she had a lot of these little tiny dolls, and she put them, there was a bench upstairs, and she put them along the bench so that they wouldn't like fall off or anything. Well, we're about close to starting the investigation, and one of the investigators goes upstairs, and one of the dolls on that bench was thrown at him. And he was like, what was that? Kind of more like at his feet. And so that was just the starting, but the more memorable part of that investigation, that we decided to split up, because we had maybe 6 people that night with us, and so 3 went in first, and we decided all the girls were going to go in first. And I was upstairs in that same room that happened earlier, sitting at a chair with 2 other women in the room. So all the guys were outside. And my view, I could see the stairwell from the back of that room kind of going downstairs, and we had a shadow detector set up. And that shadow detector gave off like a red light. And we're out in the middle of nowhere, so cars aren't driving by. I mean, we're kind of secluded. So all of a sudden, like, we're trying to ask questions and everything, and I see this shadow go from right to left along that hallway in front of the stairwell. It didn't have a form, but it was definitely a black shadow. Mm-hmm. And, of course, I was like, oh, my goodness. I'm like, that was awesome. And we asked them to do it again. And they did. They did it 2 more times. And the other investigators, we all saw it at the same time. So it wasn't one of those, you think maybe your eyes are playing tricks on you. It was kind of validated when the 2 other girls saw it. So that was one of my ones that I'm to this day, I was like, wow, that was awesome.
That is kind of freaky. How did you two meet?
I don't know. Well, the thing is, I think we kind of knew each other before then, like as acquaintances, because my sister worked somewhere where one of Will's friends worked, and I don't know. I think we kind of like were acquaintances like on Facebook before then.
Well, I think well, the first time I really met you was at Dragon Con, but I think we bumped into each other before at Netherworld, because I think your sister worked there with Roy.
Yeah.
When I was helping Roy out with stuff. I think it's probably the first time I like bumped into you or something.
Yeah, that probably was it.
And I didn't know you were in the paranormal back then.
Well, now you do.
Yeah.
So you met at Dragon Con. I know you were talking about before when we talked last year. You were involved in some kind of judging contest or something like that at Dragon Con. Is that right?
I was part of with Roy when my best friend Roy would do. He was on the show Face Off for a long time on Sci-Fi, and he would do like makeup events and makeup workshops, and then he would sit me up and I would do judging for him and the people he was teaching on his workshops, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And then, of course, I would do panels and stuff on the paranormal, and so was Christina with her team.
Yeah, I wonder if, I know it was at the paranormal track where we kind of met. I think.
Yeah, you were petting a dog that had a Superman cape on.
Oh, I was, nerding out at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wearing my Rick and Morty shirt today, nerding out too. But I think it's really cool. So with the radio show and the writing, one of the things with this show that I wanted to do was to focus on how people can get involved. Because a lot of people have goals. They'll say, "Well, I want to be a photographer, I want to be a writer or painter, artist, whatever, cosplayer." There's a lot of different artistic things that people do. And one of the things I wanted to do was be able to share that process. I know people ask me, well, when can I call myself a writer? And I always answer, well, do you write? And, it's a simple question, but, if you write, you're a writer. It doesn't mean that you're going to be published or famous or anything like that. And sometimes even when you are published, it doesn't mean that you're going to be famous, right? So that's one of the things that I wanted to ask you guys about, with your process. How did you get involved in writing? How did you get involved with the show? Where do you get a genesis for ideas sometimes? Because I'm sure everybody talks about writer's block, but I'm sure with the show that you have sometimes where you're like, oh, what are we going to talk about this week?
Well, it's a different process for each thing.
Right.
For me, I'm not entirely sure how it is for Christina, but like if I'm writing the type of scripts that I write, I have to get into the world of the absurd in my head. And
can we? Do you mind if we share with people like that? You worked on a really popular show. Do you mind? Do you mind if we tell everybody that you were with Sharknado?
What? Yeah, that one. Now that we're on the last one, but the other one, I kind of we're kind of holding off on it because the season that I am not involved with is running at the moment.
Right.
And Danger Island is very awesome, people, so go watch it. But still,
yeah.
With that type of stuff, I have to get into the world of the absurd. I just have to start. And Christina can't stand it when I'm in that mood. But
like Bizarro really, World type thing.
I'm just into pure. I could put it politely. I'm in pure silly mode. I'm thinking just crazy stuff. It's like the best way to explain it is Monty Python mode. You're just thinking the most silly and absurd thing that you can think of, and then you're trying to make it work. And it's kind of funny because she's doing that right now on a project. and I can see her totally enjoy it, but when she sees someone else does it, I think she sees how it's kind of ridiculous, and she kind of plays off on it.
Yeah.
But really,
Well,
yeah, but it is a strange thing. I mean, I never forget when I first did it on a film, Attack of the Killer Donuts, which is a more recent film, but it was written a lot earlier. It was a weird place to be. It was a very weird place to be because it's not normal when you're being there sober. Best way to put it.
Yeah.
And but there, to me, I wanted to actually go back to something you were saying. There's a difference between being a writer and being an author. When you're writing, you're a writer. Whether it gets published, whether it gets put out there or not, and then being an author, even when it gets put out there, because there's a lot of stuff that a lot of people write that we never get credit on. My name is not on a lot of things that I've worked on because I'm so far down the list of the people involved in the project. But when you get published, like in my book, Souls of Norcross, the other one coming out, or working on some other films where my name has actually been on them, now you're a published author, and there's a difference there because people expect the same quality every time, which is very hard to do. When you become an author, there's expectations now. Whether you're popular, not popular, or nothing, or nobody, if someone's read it, they expect your next work to be similar or of the same quality. And that's usually what I tell a lot of people. It's like, when to become a writer, you need to write. To become an author, someone needs to accept it. And then you're going to start having to meet expectations. And it becomes more of a complicated process. But
I was actually talking with a friend of mine recently who is an author, and we were talking about the same thing. That when you put something out there, you progress and you work on it. You get better. You meet a lot of new people, and those people help you along the way, and they also have influence of your writing style and how you can improve and that kind of thing. And it can be kind of frustrating sometimes when you feel like you're really doing a great piece of work, and you're getting some feedback, but it's not getting a lot of traction. And and promoting a book versus just writing it and publishing it are like two different realms. I mean, promotion and advertising are like the first 10% is actually writing the book and publishing it, and then the next 90% is getting the word out there about it, and trying to build an audience.
But there's also a frustration in the writing process. Christina and I were writing a vampire story. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was slightly absurd, but it was very tame and mature compared to what I usually write. And I hit a block, and I still have not got over that wall. I mean, I don't know where to progress with the story because it's like I got into the second act, and now I got all these other ideas that have to go back to the first act. But now the first act is too long if I put them in, so it becomes like a war with the story, and that's a different mindset too. That like when I write something on the absurd, I have to get in that mind frame. But when I write something about the paranormal or more of a traditional story, I have to get into a very, very relaxed state to have the story come out, because if not, it comes out in too many pieces, and none of them are like strung together. It's like I'll have a great idea for the third act and the second act, and then back to the third act and back to the first act. It's almost like I'd have to have 3 different notebooks to put the acts together.
And Christina, when you're working together like this and you're writing, what are your thoughts about that kind of thing?
Well, one of the ones we're working on right now, the idea for it actually, I think it came from a dream, and I don't.
That's a great
I don't
source.
exactly remember the the dream.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember waking up, I was like, oh, I got to write this down. Because, yeah, that's what we've been going off of since then. But, yeah, it's like, for me, it's almost like, okay, where do I want this story to go?
Mm-hmm.
What's that ending point? And then, okay, I know where that is. Then I feel like I can work on filling in the details, filling in the missing pieces.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's kind of absurd, same lines as Will's stuff, but I always have to check with him because I feel like he's the master when it comes to the absurd stuff. Because I'm like, okay, is this too out in left field or is it just right? Like,
I think that's a great like a great temperature check. You know, you're like, hey, does this sound like completely abnormal and absurd, or does it kind of make sense, or what?
Yeah.
And it has to make sense within the story.
Yeah, that too.
Right,
yeah.
right. Does it fit? Yeah. Yeah. That's
And like I find writing. Kind of like we're working on a book right now about some of our paranormal experiences. That, to me, that just rolls right off. It's easy because it's something that has happened. You just write it down, and I mean, fix it later, and you're pretty much done. To me, that's the easiest kind of writing.
Yeah, I've heard the editing process is like the where you're actually really writing, like the first draft and stuff. Is just where you're just putting out a flurry of ideas, and you're kind of boning it together, putting it, pinning it together, or whatever, and fleshing it out, and then you go back and you edit it, just like you were saying before about now Act 1 doesn't really mesh up with Act 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
Where you have to go back and edit it to make it make sense. So
I was commissioned to do 2 screenplays like about 3 years ago, and one of them was Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmelia, and God, I never realized how hard it is to rewrite someone else's work.
Mm-hmm.
That comes from a completely that's a skill on its own, I think, because they wanted me to take that movie but create a beginning and an end to the narrative, and that means I had to dream up new scenes that were not in the book. And that was extremely hard. And in the end, it ended up being longer than the actual story. Sadly, it never got picked up, though. It never got filmed. And the rights went away, so now someone else is working on it. Praise Jesus.
Well, we're getting ready to hit the half an hour mark when we need to do a couple of station announcements. Can you both hold on for just a minute?
Yes, sir.
That'd be great. And I'm gonna just play the studio announcements, and you've been listening to Muses, Memoirs, and More. I'm your host, Adam Messer. I appreciate you tuning in, and get ready to hear some awesome station program announcements.
You are listening to WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5,
yes,
WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
The Swan Song, Tybee Island's final prom, is Saturday, July 14th from 7 to 11 p.m. at Tybee American Legion Hall. The prom benefits the Island's Feral Cat Project. Entertainment includes live music from the Girlfriends and the last crowning of the Tybee Prom King and Queen. For more information, 912-484-7355.
Okay.
WRUU listeners like you crave exploration and discovery. That's how we can offer your business or organization a unique way to separate your name from the clutter inherent in commercial radio advertising. Underwriting on non-commercial WRUU will make your name stand out because we allow only a limited number of sponsorships per hour, and your message will be reaching listeners who are actively engaged in program programs that demand their attention. Let our team build a customized plan to meet your marketing goals by linking your name to our unique music and talk programs. For more information, email underwriting@WRUU.org.
Smokemakers, ribs, and polio.
WRUU 107.5 FM is community radio with global soul. Tune in later today. From 5 to 6, PT Bridgeport presents When the Moon Sings, quiet and contemplative music and interviews with local writers and artists. From 6 to 7, Carrie Smith presents The Verb Altitude Hour, discussing a wide range of topics and contemporary political news. From 7 to 8, Curtis Dansby presents The Midnight Rain, smooth jazz, classic soul, neo-soul, and R&B. From 9 to 10, DJ Wildlife Beasy presents Wildlife Radio, independent and mainstream rap and R&B. From 10 to 11, Chris Susi presents The Odd Time Radio Hour, stories and songs in the style of old-time radio. From 11 to midnight, Max Zukoff presents Backseat Tunes, everything indie, from shoegaze to dream pop and college rock. Find our full schedule at WRUU.org.
Please, no, I can't hear that anymore.
Hey, and we're back. This is Adam Messer with your host for Muses, Memoirs, and More. And my guests today are Will Aymerich and Christina Kieffer from Rock Radio and More. Hey guys, how you doing? How you doing? Can you hear me?
Good. Yeah.
All right. So, Will, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks a lot for being our guest today on our first show for Muses, Memoirs, and More, your show about authors, artists, and entertainers. So we were talking earlier before the break about the writing process and having to go back through with editing, and sometimes that that can be one of the hardest things with writing. It's not so much getting the ideas, but going back and saying, hey, does this fit or does it not fit? And so, can you tell me a little bit more about your current project? You're working on the writing process with it.
It's pretty much all Christina's story, believe it or not. But the process for me has almost been the same as it was for NATO. It's just thinking of crazy stuff and running with it, like a gigantic prehistoric sloth chasing someone to kill them, and for some reason the person can't seem to run away. I mean, it's stuff like that. I mean, that's the mentality that I'm in when writing it. And then, finding inspiration for new scenes, like that video where you see like a little tornado take away porta potty. I have this whole idea of someone actually being in that porta potty.
Oh gosh!
And
like Wizard of Oz.
Kind of. And so it's really absurd things like that is inspiring me in the process that I'm in. But when we start editing it, that's when it becomes a chore. Because for instance, her and I had this really major drawn-out scene, which had some exposition in it, where last week, working on it, we kind of already removed it. And we shortened the intro by adding two new scenes back to back. Well, there weren't new scenes. There were scenes that were later on in the story that are now in the intro.
Okay.
And so, you have to speed up the narrative and actually also entertain the audience in the process of when they see it. So it changes things, and it's a really hard mindset, because after a while, these things become your babies.
Right.
Yeah, you get attached to the story and what you've kind of created. But my background, I've done more scientific writing, which if you've ever read like a scientific paper, it's very dry, to the point. There's nothing exciting about it. And coming from that and then doing something like this, it's like a relief. It's because it's a lot more fun to do. When it's scientific writing, it's, oh goodness, you have to have everything in a certain way. It's just boring. I mean,
yeah, I've done a lot of academic writing with my my degrees that I worked on, so I know what you mean with that. And I imagine scientific writing, especially with data and analysis and things like that, probably a little bit more dry.
Sometimes I enjoy it, but when somebody else reads your work, they're like, "This is horrible. Like, why are you making me read this? This is not fun."
Yeah, I went to school to be a preacher, and in the end, I did Piranaconda. Yay!
Oh wow!
Yeah, I know, right?
Excuse me. I think it's
really?
I think it's cool. You know, I prefer honestly reading nonfiction, but I like to write fiction, and I enjoy it. So I think it's kind of weird how our brains work. That you can have one study of subject, and that's what you do, and then when it comes to creatively doing something else, like you said, you try to think of what's the most absurd, or weird thing out there, and then does it fit? And I just think it's kind of crazy how our brains can work that way, Well,
I like to do it just because people tell me you can't or you shouldn't. I mean, you look at a tornado and you look at a bunch of sharks in the water and you're like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you tell someone and they're like, that's the dumbest thing ever. No one would want to see that. And okay, there you go. You were wrong.
Yeah, and you had a ton of people want to watch it, and they have multiple sequels to it.
Now, this is the last one, so, yep. Well, the last one that anyone's admitting to.
Oh, gosh.
That might be another spin-off series.
Well, you know it. They're going to turn it into a cartoon.
Did you see the video yesterday about the, I can't remember where it was, but there was a rainstorm that was actually throwing live aquatic life into the streets?
Yeah, well, there was one in Australia that happened a year ago, which actually threw live sharks onto the beach. I never forget it, 'cause, like, everyone all over Twitter is throwing me and Thunder Levin, the main writer, and Anthony, all these, like, they're linking it to us, going, oh my God, it's real.
Oh, yeah. Like art imitating life and then life imitating art.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was saying that to me, I like to write what, like I said, because people are saying it can't be done, but at the same time, I like writing what I want to see. Like, I've been throwing around this idea about having a serial killer trapped in a cruise ship. And, it's like a serious murder mystery, but of course, in the process of trying to write it with myself and then throwing the idea to other people, no one could come up with an ending. So, of course, I was like, this is a great way to reboot Sharknado, because in the end, a Sharknado pops up and takes out the whole ship. That's how it ends.
Kind of like a prequel to the...
Well, not a prequel, but just, 5 years down the road when people forgot about Sharknado, this is just a weird way to bring it back.
Oh, okay, yeah. That'd be kind of neat.
Yeah. Remember these things?
Gosh.
Do you remember when? Yeah, that's kind of cool.
I think it's better than bringing back Piranaconda, which is what everyone wants to bring back. And I'm like, that's no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So
it's not bad. I enjoyed it, but it's just, no.
Wow.
So we're this is Muses, Memoirs, and More. I'm your host, Adam Messer, and today's guests are Will Aymerich and Christina Kieffer. We're on WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. So today's guests, if you're just now tuning in, are Will Aymerich and Christina Kieffer. They are the co-hosts for the Rock Radio and More show, and a couple of my friends, I met them last year, and they're paranormal investigators, they're writers, they're there's a lot of stuff that you guys are. So I appreciate y'all being on the show today. We were just talking about writing and Sharknado and a vampire story, paranormal stories. So I really appreciate y'all being on the show today.
No problem.
Thanks.
Christina, you were saying that you had the vision in a dream, and you're like, I have to write this down. Tell me about that dream. What was it? What was it like? Without, you don't have to reveal the story or anything like that, but what was it like?
It was, I don't remember exactly what the dream was, but I just remember I woke up, I was like, oh my goodness, I need to write this down real quick. I mean, it was one of those dreams that was kind of vivid, and you some dreams you
like a
forget
lucid type
right
dream
off the bat. And then other ones you remember. I was like, oh, I got to write this down. And I ended up, it was funny, because I think it was that morning, right when I woke up, I messaged Will, and I was like, hey, how about this idea? And he was like, okay.
Nice.
That was a good idea.
Well, on your side of it, what were you thinking, Will, when she contacted you about it?
I like the idea. Actually, she's done it twice. And the first one, I actually have it written down on a memo pad in my desk. It's more of an apocalyptic type story, which is really cool.
Oh.
The second one is the one that we're actually working on, which, to give you a hint, has to do with the La Brea tar pit and the fossils coming back to life.
Oh,
but the
okay.
name of the story is Pure Sci-Fi Channel Gold.
Pure Sci-Fi Channel Gold?
It's right up there with Sharknado and Three-Headed Shark Attack.
Oh my goodness.
People will just want to watch it just because of the name.
Yeah, I mean, that does sound pretty cool. I remember when they changed it to the Sci-Fi Channel from Sci-Fi SCI-FI to SY-FY, and always been one of those kind of grew up watching Star Trek, and especially Next Gen was one of my favorite shows as a kid, and I've always had I've kind of enjoyed like that nerdy geeky stuff, and I think you're right. People would, just because of the title, they would kind of check it out and say, well, what's this about?
Well, the year the first Sharknado came out was the year that they really tried to bank on doing stuff that's more geek and fan related, not just in the sci-fi genre. And if someone is willing to dig into my Instagram and go back, there's a picture of a bunch of the DVDs that was submitted to Sci-Fi. And the funny thing is all of these have like these special packages like Lake Placid and all that stuff. And Sharknado's there on a rewritable DVD, just written in a marker. And I never forget, people looked at that and they were like, "Oh, that sounds cool. What the heck is it?" and the fact of the matter is that it goes into there's that, like what you and I were saying, the part of selling the story, that's where it gets hard, because when even if you're writing something that's dramatic or really good, like take for instance the movie Seven. Imagine trying to sell that to someone, a serial killer who kills someone based upon the seven deadly sins of the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds boring. But when you watch the actual movie, it's incredible. Or imagine someone trying to pitch Casablanca. The movie sounds far more complicated than it really is. When you try to break it down, I mean, selling a story to me is always the hard part, but the inspiration and the muse to the story is always the fun part, because that's when you get to play, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Then you trim it down, and when you look at what happens, like when you're writing and when you're doing authorship of your own book, this doesn't happen as much because you're editing it yourself.
Right.
But when you're working on a screenplay or a movie, your draft usually gets handed to another writer who trims yours apart. And then they take his draft to someone else who trims it apart even more. Because you have to trim it down to where every page is 1 minute of the movie, approximately. And then it ends up coming back, like in my case, it usually ends up coming back to me to do dialogue in a lot of stories. And what ends up getting handed to me if I worked on it beforehand to do dialogue is kind of sad because it's usually completely different from what was originally written. But that's something that happens in TV and movies like crazy. You know, you get this great idea, and then the movie that comes out in the end is very different from what you originally wrote, but most of the time it's better. So there is that aspect of it. Unless you're working on a low budget.
Have you ever heard of that book called Save the Cat?
No.
It's a screenwriting book, and I can't think of the author's name right off the top of my head, but it's been a really popular book. And they say that Hollywood kind of follows that format. You know, every page is a minute of action or dialogue or whatever it is. And one of the things that he talks about is back in the day that they used to have where you'd have a scene where it would show, the first scene would show who the good guy is or the good girl or whatever and why, and then it would go through and it's kind of weird because the formula that the guy laid out in the book, it's almost a magical formula that Hollywood follows step by step by step. But it's very formulaic. I mean, they're like, at this minute there's going to be, this and this and this, and it really touches what the audience is, what people expect. It's kind of like saying the same story, but, telling a different story with different characters, but having the same kind of format.
Well, there is a formula. There is a direct formula to screenwriting, especially when it comes to creating the story. It's 3 acts, 90 minutes, 90 pages, 1 minute a page, and then everyone needs to be introduced within the first 3 pages. The plot needs to be put in place within the first 5 minutes. And then, of course, everything needs to pan out in the 3rd act. And that's pretty much the formula except for Steven Spielberg. Spielberg does 2.5 acts. And by the time that half act or that 3rd act comes in, everything is a sealed deal within 5 minutes. And that's been his formula for everything except Schindler's List. And M. Night Shyamalan kind of follows that formula as well. But yeah, you have to have the characters and the plot done in the beginning. You have to have the MacGuffin put in somewhere in the 2nd act, and everything needs to start panning out immediately from the beginning of the 3rd act. And the 3rd act should never take longer than 15 minutes. But that has been kind of changing because of the Marvel movie. Recently, there's a lot more hanging.
With your book that you're working on, it's more kind of like a docu type book where you're just talking about some of your experiences and that kind of thing. Is that right?
Yeah.
So with that, thinking out ahead, are there any plans to doing like a screen adaptation of any of that?
I don't know how.
It's almost every chapter in the book. It's different. It's almost it's an individual investigation, and it could be something that Will did, or it could be something that I did.
Okay.
Not all of them are together. We decided and agreed to go like early on in our histories and actually write and tell of investigations that we did before we met one another. So I'm going to have, I guess each chapter can be written as an adaptation, especially like an audio one, like an audio book or an audio drama. But visual for a story, it would take some creative license on some of these stories.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, that's something I noticed with a lot of people doing short films. Like recently here in Savannah, we had the 48-hour film festival, and kind of just taking film to the next level. And circling back around with the show, just people have so many different aspects that they can be creatively. They can be a writer, a painter, musician, radio talk show host, a paranormal investigator. There's so many creative ways that you can do things out there, and so that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy it and enjoy meeting creative people like yourself, with both of y'all, because you kind of feed off that energy. You get that good vibe, and it kind of helps you with your project the next time that you're working on it. And I believe that you should try to work on whatever you're doing. Try to do something, at least one thing a day towards it.
Yeah.
We need to get better at that, Will.
Yeah. At the moment, though, I just stare at my foot and nothing happens.
Well, yeah. There's times like I've been working on actually a vampire story too called The Coven of Savannah. It's a series of short stories, kind of like a historical fictional type setting in Savannah, and I've written 3 stories already, and I haven't touched it in about a month. So
yeah.
There's times where you just kind of get a lot of work done, and then there's other times where you have other priorities that you have to take care of, and so it's understandable.
Normally, Will and we try to at least meet up once a week. Sometimes we can't do that, but we try to meet up once a week and work for like 3 or 4 hours on
nice.
some of our projects. Yeah, so I guess it kind of maybe makes up for not working on it every day, but then some of the
the thing has to be that you need to keep yourself inspired in the story that you're creating. Like for me right now, I'm having a ball with the book, with the just writing down my adventures from memory. But when it comes to creating the story, the screenplay that Christina and I are working on, it's been a little bit tougher. Primarily because I don't want to rehash things that I've already done in these type of crazy stories.
Yeah, and we also try to combine both of our ideas so it creates something new.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate both of y'all being on the show today. I'm getting ready to wrap the hour up, but you've been listening to Muses, Memoirs, and More. Our guests today have been Will Aymerich and Christina Kieffer. Thank you so much for being on, both of y'all.
Thanks for having us.